Welcome to Paradox Jukebox, an unconventional podcast for the unconventional music lover. Brought to you by Music on the Move Studios, a woman-led company working to help musicians move their careers forward through education and live events. I'm your host, Caitie Thompson. Thank you so much for being with me today. On the show, we have Miss Lauren Anderson, a fierce blues artist from the Chicago area. She spent a little time in Kansas City, and then she moved her way down to Nashville. And it has to be said, Lauren Anderson has the type of voice that makes you shut up and listen. When this chick opens her mouth, the entire room goes dead quiet because she is that powerful and that captivating. So I'm so excited to have her on the show. She's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the music that she's been working on. We're going to discuss what her journey through the industry has been like, and you'll hear a little bit from her dog, Billy. He's a new puppy, and so he had to, throw a few barks in there for us. But I have to tell you, I think the coolest thing about this episode is how real she is with her feelings and experiences that she went through. So sit back and listen. This is her track, Back to Chicago. I hope you enjoy it.
You broke my heart on a cloudy day, and not one word did you even say. You walked out on me and mine, and all you left was wasted time. I'm going back to Chicago, yeah. And I'm leaving soon, yeah. I'm going home to Chicago.
Welcome, everyone, to Paradox Jukebox. It is your host, Caitie Thompson, and I have Miss Lauren Anderson with me today. What's up, friend?
Hey, what's going on? I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been actually too long since I think we've hung out. The last time was at a Music on the Move showcase, right?
Yeah, I know. And when was that? That was a couple months ago at this point?
It wasn't it? Like back in like...
No.
Yeah, it was January.
Was that January?
God, that's nuts.
God, yeah, it's been too long. Clearly, we can't remember.
Yeah, clearly, way too long.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to have you on the show, and I can't wait to talk about all the cool stuff that you're getting into. But I kind of want to dive into your backstory a little bit, because as I was doing some research on you, I found out some pretty cool stuff. So,
oh, sweet.
You're from Chicago, right?
I am. Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
And you're a classically trained musician.
I am. Yeah, I went to undergrad for opera, believe it or not.
Wow.
You can't tell now by my raspy voice from singing for 3 hours last night. Once upon a time, I wanted to be an opera singer.
That is incredible. I actually went to a school and I'm a classically trained percussionist, so all of my best friends were opera singers.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. I love that.
Yes. So when I read that about you, I was like, get out. This is too fun.
That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. I always love, I think that there's a lot of different ways to like come into your own, but I do think that like being classically trained really does help in a lot of ways. Like, even though neither of us do classical, like percussion or like singing at this point, like I feel like I got, like, you just learn a lot of tools from that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Not to discount the other ways to learn the instrument, obviously, but I definitely am happy that I went that route for myself,
Yeah, I feel you. I attribute, where I am as a musician to the education that I got as a classical musician for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Definitely.
okay, so I have to ask you, what was your favorite opera that you sang when you were doing your undergrad?
Oh, God. I feel like it was like so long ago.
I know, it's like another lifetime.
I don't know. Well, so I didn't get to sing the lead in this, but I did once upon a time spend the bulk of a summer in a tiny little town in Italy called Nova Feltria. And I toured with it was like a program. I toured with an opera and I sang chorus in there. I got to learn a little bit of Italian. I got to take voice lessons, like eat Italian food. Actually, it was the year like Italy won the cup that year, so I got to celebrate
Oh my
with
God.
Italians when they won the cup. And I traveled the opera that I toured with was La Traviata.
Oh,
And so,
cool.
I didn't get to sing like one of the big arias. I was just in the chorus, but like I feel like that opera is always going to have like a special place in my heart just because of that.
That sounds like the biggest party ever.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was insane. Opera singers, I mean, they can get a little crazy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, they
Don't
can.
miss out Opera singers. Yeah.
Wow, that is so much fun. Yeah, I can attest to the fact that opera singers get super wild. My
Yeah.
house in college, we were the vocal party house. So
Oh wow.
whenever there was a an opera that was done or some kind of a production, everybody ended up at my duplex with my best friends, and yeah, it was just a night of just
That's awesome.
mayhem and debauchery. Really, it was
Yeah.
hilarious.
I love it, man. Yeah. Those are the days.
Yes, indeed. So, okay, so you were a classically, performing artist, but then you transitioned into like rock and roll and blues. So, tell me a little bit about how
Yeah.
that happened.
Yeah. So I always felt like even when I was in school that there was like this fork in the road, and I was trying to figure out like how long I could kind of like straddle both sides of the fence. You know what I mean? Like I'd always been interested in like more pop music. Like I grew up with like, 90s R&B and like old school blues. Like I grew up listening to like Etta James and Whitney Houston and Lauryn Hill, and then Christina Aguilera, Kelly Clarkson, like Susan Tedeschi, Aretha Franklin, like all the big great singers. So I always had that in my heart.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until it was actually, I had this moment it's early on in college, but I was too stubborn to quit. But I had a moment in my like freshman year where I was actually hanging out with a bunch of the other opera singers. And I just had this moment. It was in the library in a coffee shop where they're all talking about something opera. And I had this out of body experience where I was just like, oh my God, these aren't my people. Like these are great people, but they're not my people. Like I just didn't it didn't feel like a world that was mine. You know what I mean? Like it just and like even though that doesn't necessarily have to do anything with the career, but it just I don't know, it just was like this moment where I was like, this isn't the field I need to be in. And
Wow.
so I went ahead and I finished the degree, and and I still went and did that, Italy tour, which was fun. Um, but then at that point I still hadn't decided like to just go for it. You know what I mean? I don't know, I might be getting ahead of myself here, but in terms of my story, but like I think I slowly kind of started like writing more music. I didn't start learning the guitar until my senior year of college, so I
Oh,
was kind
wow.
of a late yeah, I was kind of a late bloomer in terms of the guitar. And then I because I wasn't ready to just start performing yet, like I just didn't feel like I had the confidence yet. And so then I went to grad school for music therapy, and so I just kind of continued to put off living this dream. But I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, not at all. No,
Did I
you're
answer your
good.
question?
Go, girl. You're good. So, okay, so you kind of put it off, and then you
Yeah.
went into your master's for music therapy.
Yes. Yes.
And then what happened after that? What kind of was the turning point and launched you into being an artist?
Yeah, so I was working in Kansas City at the time. I'd been there for years as a therapist on the pediatric unit, and I loved it. Like I really loved that job. I still do. I still have my credentials. Like I can still practice, but just the more I put off, you know, being a singer. I don't know if you've ever had this situation, but like if you have a dream, like it doesn't just die. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't go away easily.
Yep.
And the more I put off being a singer, the like more miserable I was, which is not a great quality for a therapist for kids. And so at that point I started kind of getting more into, once I officially finished. It took after I started practicing music therapy, I still had to write my thesis, and so it took a second for me to finish the degree. So once I officially finished my degree, I was like, okay, I've got time to start performing and really trying to go after this singing career that I want. And started to just play a bunch of like those just shitty, like I think I had a residency at Bar Louie or
Yeah.
something, you know, something stupid where it was only fun when I could rope my friends into coming, but otherwise I was like playing to a bunch of people who didn't care.
Right.
But it was like, it was getting your foot wet,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I started doing that, and then eventually I ended up being really lucky. I don't know if you know these names, but they in Kansas City they were pretty big, well-known people. But I went to a jam once, and I like walk in and there's like nobody there, but there's two like really well-known. At the time, they were really well-known in Kansas City. Now I think one of the names is really well-known, pretty much like worldwide. But um, Trampled Underfoot they're not together anymore, but they were a huge blues band of siblings that were they're out of Kansas City. And then Samantha Fish at the time was dating Chris, who was the drummer in that band, and she's now like a worldwide, like she's huge. Samantha
Yeah.
Fish is a badass. Yeah, so they were sitting there at the bar at this jam, and I walk in and I'm just like, shit. Like, I'm new. I'm not good at jamming at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like a baby in this world. And I ended up having to play like right after Samantha Fish.
Oh
I was
God.
like, Jesus, like if anybody's listening and doesn't know Samantha Fish, like go look her up. And then imagine baby little Lauren having to play after her at a jam. Like I literally sat there at the bar and was like, okay, Lauren, if there was any time for you to just put your big girl pants on and just suck it up and do it, now's the time.
This is
And I
it.
did. And I felt really good about my performance. And she came up afterwards and was like, great job. And the cool thing about that situation was I think Trampled Underfoot was about to part ways. And so Chris, the drummer, was looking for a new gig and messaged me after that and said, hey, do you need a drummer? And so he was my first drummer ever. And like really opened a lot of doors. Like I hung out with Samantha for a second, and like just they really kind of helped get me going, in Kansas City. And unfortunately I haven't kept in touch with them quite as well as I would have liked to. But I think that if I ran into them, like, things would be cool. But like they definitely really helped me get things going in the beginning. And so I started then just touring out of Kansas City, and then eventually was just like, again, another fork in the road. Like, how long can you really tour when you're doing a full-time job?
Right. Yep.
And so then that was kind of the point where I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be in Kansas City for forever. So do I want to go back home to Chicago, or do I want to check out Nashville? And at that point, I had come into Nashville once and I recorded a couple songs at Ocean Way, and just loved the town when I was visiting here. So I decided that, Nashville doesn't have to be for my forever town, but I definitely didn't want to not come check it out. So
Yeah.
been here for 4.5 years now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think you're doing a fantastic job. I mean, it seems like, every time I get on socials and stuff, you're always playing somewhere. At least pre-COVID, you were always playing somewhere, and
Yeah.
just so many cool things that you're doing. So, I
Thank
mean,
you.
I'm so glad that, all these forks in the road led you to Nashville, and then ultimately led, to us meeting, you being a part of Music on the Move with Erin and I. And
Yeah.
I think it's just
I
awesome.
love what y'all are doing, by the way.
Thank
Side
you.
note, I love that showcase. It was, and the stage that it's at now, like, maybe it move, but like, I don't know. I just love that you guys are like bringing women together and just kind of charging ahead. It's a fun showcase
Thank
and a
you.
podcast now too.
Yes.
You
Yes.
literally, you're making moves.
Trying, man. I mean, it's everything that we can do to just help other women and lift each other up. So, I mean, that's what it's all
Exactly.
about.
That's
So,
it. 100%. I
so
agree.
speaking of podcasts, you have a podcast.
I do. I do. Yeah.
All right, well,
I
let's talk
know.
about it. Tell us what it's all
Yeah.
about.
So it's another music podcast. It's called I've Got a Song for That, which the backstory of that phrase is apparently, I don't remember this, but apparently in like preschool, I was that annoying kid who like the teacher would be explaining to the class what we were about to do, and I would like interrupt her and be like, oh, 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 oh. I've got a song for that. And I would just like make up a song.
That is
Which I'm sure was cute
precious.
like the first one or two times, but like I'm sure after a second she was like, all right, Lauren. Oh,
That's enough,
Lauren.
child.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's the podcast where the name came from. But more or less, it started in the middle of the pandemic. So like it's been on for a year now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I originally had the idea of like maybe I could use this podcast as like a platform to talk to musicians and industry, but also like jam with them. So when it first started, I tried to figure out a way to safely get together and like jam with the musicians that I had on there. And then obviously that soon, like there's copyright issues, like you can't get
Yeah.
together with everybody. Like it wasn't feasible. So I kind of turned it into like, instead of us playing a song, I usually ask a song like, or a question like, what song has been getting you through, the pandemic or something like that. The music therapist's question, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
But it's a musician and industry podcast, where we kind of talk about like, I don't know, just like the nitty gritty parts of the career. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I love hearing like everybody's stories, and I love hearing what makes them tick and what keeps them going, and like, what makes them want to just like throw the towel in, and like what advice they have. Like I love hearing like, again, it's probably the therapist background. I love hearing like the whys, and
Yeah.
like, so that's kind of what the podcast is about. So, it is a musician podcast, but I think that there's kind of like some overarching like just general life themes that are kind of wrapped into it.
For sure. I
Yeah.
love your podcast. I've listened to
Thank
it quite
you.
a bit, and
Oh,
I love you as an interviewer. I think you ask great questions, and it's
thank
just a
you.
lot of the people that have come on. I mean, they've got some really cool stories.
Yeah, they do. I mean, no matter where you are in your career, you've experienced something that's unique for you,
Yep.
and not everybody gets a platform to share that. So, I definitely have really, I've found that I love hosting a podcast more than I expected to. Have you found that?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Yeah.
And
It's,
this podcast has actually been like a few years in the making.
oh, wow.
It used to be called NAMC, and which is like North American Music Collective. And
Oh, sweet.
like right about the time that I was trying to release it, I ended up like I was losing students and I was going broke, and I'm like, holy crap, I need a
Yeah.
job. So I kind of had to put it on hold. But
Yeah.
now that Erin and I have really built up Music on the Move, and I have the
You're
time
cutting
and
out.
space for this, I love it. It is so much fun. So
Yeah, it's so much fun.
yeah.
I really love it. And it's selfishly for me too, since a lot of the questions are like, what made you want to quit? Or like, what kept you going? It's like, no matter where I am, when you talk to other people and musicians, it's like, it's just like another source of like keeping you going. Like, if any musician is listening out there, like I feel like if you're feeling like stuck, just go like listen to a music podcast and listen to somebody else's story, or like call up a friend. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
feel like listening to other people's stories is like a really good way to kind of keep you moving.
Absolutely. It keeps you
Music on the
grounded.
move.
Yeah. Well, and so okay, so let's I'm gonna turn the tide on you a little bit. So through the course of you making these transitions and going through all these forks in the road, like were there times when you were ready to just say, you know what, no, I can't do this?
Oh my God. Like 2 minutes before you called, like all the time. I mean, literally, like and I think that that's why, like, that's like I was saying, a question I ask everybody on my podcast, literally because it's a real thing for me.
Yeah.
I mean, music's tough. Like
Yes,
it
it
costs a
is.
lot of money. I've cried a lot over it. Like you're constantly putting yourself in a position where you're judged,
Yep.
and that's tough. And and then also just like for us women, like you kind of feel like there's like a time limit for you. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you're not 25, then you might as well be 85,
Yep.
and so that's a big stressor for me. Especially since I kind of got into this late in the game.
Sure.
Um, and so, yeah, I feel like every 2 seconds, I feel like I want to quit. So somebody gave me some advice in regards to that when I first moved here. I think his name is terrible that I remember his vice, but I think it's Jerry Vandiver. And if he listens, he's going to be like, Lauren, you butchered my name. I was connected to him through a couple fans of mine in Kansas City, and he, has been in like Nashville for 30, 40 years, has had a couple hits picked up by like, Tim McGraw and, some other bigger country artists like, back in the day. And
Yeah.
so he's like really been doing the thing for a while. And he was nice enough to sit down and have some coffee with me on more than one occasion. And he gave me this advice, and I'm going to butcher what he called it, but he called it something along the lines of like the 20-second rule. Have you heard this?
I don't know. Potentially.
So, and maybe I'm calling it the wrong thing. Maybe it's like the 20-minute rule, but more or less, he says, Lauren, when you're going after your dreams, every 20 seconds, it's going to feel like you want to quit. And it's not about not feeling that. It's about knowing that it's coming and knowing that eventually it'll pass again, and knowing and having things in place to kind of keep you going. And I remember like, at that point I was just like, I get it. Like I've been there, but I was still new to Nashville and, had stars in my eyes. And I remember like the first time I really wanted to quit, I messaged him and I was like, Jerry, I'm here. And you having told me this rule is making me feel less like I want to quit. Like it gives you kind of a light at the end of the tunnel.
For you to change, you said your mind was made up, but I know you, babe. Once I'm gone, you'll be running back. You always want what you can't take.
You know what I mean? Kind of like seeing the big picture of like, this is just a moment. This isn't forever.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think that's probably one of the best advices that I've been given.
That's incredible advice. And I love it because, a lot of our listeners are just kind of starting to break into the music industry, and so it's thank you for the sage advice, and thank you for Jerry, thank you so much for passing that on to Lauren, who's passing it on to us. If you're listening.
I know, right? I love it. It's so good.
That's awesome. So, okay, so when you got to Nashville 4 years ago, and let's say maybe technically you're like 2 years in, what do you think has been the hardest struggle for you being a musician in Nashville?
Yeah, well, I think that you kind of just touched on it of like, no matter how long you've been a musician, you start over when you move to Nashville.
Yeah.
And that's probably somewhat true if you move to a new location anyway, like unless you're really well established already.
Yeah.
Like you just have to pay your dues, you know what I mean? Especially in Nashville.
Yep.
And so, oh geez, sorry.
No, it's okay. Hi, Billy.
Billy doesn't like paying dues either. Billy, we feel ya.
Yes, we do, buddy.
Yes, we do. Yeah, so that was hard because especially like I was touring like a lot when I was in Kansas City, and moved to Nashville and had to find a new band and had to find new contacts. And at the time, like I was touring to places that were like regional and pretty easy drives from Kansas City. So when you move to Nashville, all of a sudden it's a 12-hour drive to like, Omaha or whatever, you know what I mean? Like somewhere closer in the region to Kansas City. So I think that was kind of tough. I think that it was kind of good for me, like another thing that I feel like ebbs and flows for every musician is that you're not going to keep going unless your ego is big enough to keep going. But you can't be an asshole and you can't let it, you know what I mean? Like you can't let it just like take over the world.
Yep.
So I really feel like when I moved here, it was a good ego check for me. It was a good dose of humility to be like, Lauren, you're not you're not the shit. Like, sit your ass back down and get to work. Which you need every once in a while, because otherwise your ego just takes over.
Yes.
That's never good. Nobody wants that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and being in a place like Nashville that is flooded with such incredible talent. I mean, you can't spit into the wind and not hit 15 fantastic musicians.
It's crazy, right? It's easy to like get bogged down from that, or like, or like, if your ego's running away, kind of still like it could easily make you into like a bitter, crazy, terrible person to be around. But like, I don't know, there's room for all of us. We're all doing our own thing in the end. I think that you just have to remind yourself that like, you don't need to be in competition with anybody.
Right. And I'm going to go back and, do the same thing here. Like, there's another musician friend of mine who gave me a piece of advice, and I can't remember which one it was at the moment.
Yeah, don't you love it?
Yes, I know.
Your advice was really good, but I'm sorry.
I can't remember who you are.
Yeah.
So he told me, he said, it's not about how good you are in this town. It's about how good you are at what you do in this town.
Yes. That's great advice.
Yes.
That's so good. It's true, because it's really like, if you're not really like being authentic to your voice, one, it's apparent, and two, somebody else is probably doing that.
Absolutely.
Like, just be you, and which is, I think for me, that's been the toughest thing for me to come around to. I think that's one of the reasons it was good for me to not kind of get into this business until a little later in my life. I had some work to do,
Sure. Well, I think, at every stage in someone's life, I mean, we all have, different phases of work that we have to go through. And I think it's important to recognize that and to just accept it in the moment.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
And that's how you grow. And that's what's important. But I think if anything has at least saved my career in the last decade alone, was just realizing that I had to push forward for myself and not for anybody else. I wasn't doing this for anyone else except for me.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because I think that sometimes, if a goal is for any reason other than yourself, it's not, you're not going to have the motivation to do it,
Right.
But then also too, it probably, like, if your goal is for someone else, it might lead you. A musician career can look like a lot of different things.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're doing this for somebody else, you're probably going to go after, career milestones that you don't actually really want to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if you want to be a listening room, like, small theater artist, and you think that your mom wants you to be at, playing at big amphitheaters, like, you're not going to be happy. You might be a musician, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a happy musician.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's true. You got to really remind yourself you're doing it for you.
And remind yourself of the reasons why you're doing it.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Yeah. That'll definitely keep you going.
Do you ever make vision boards for yourself?
Oh my God, literally all the time. I'm such a nerd. I like hide them in my room because I'm like, I need to be able to see this, but my roommates are in and out of my room because of my dog, and I'm like, I don't want anybody else to see this. Which is so stupid. I'm like, I'm wearing my heart on my sleeve. They know every picture up there. Like, they know what my goals are, but oh my God, I do it all the time. On the 1st of every January, I make a vision board for the year.
Nice.
And God, I'm such a nerd. I can't believe I'm admitting this. And I write a Dear Universe letter as if the year's already gone by, saying this 2021 was a great year because, and I just kind of like lay out, like, as if the year went how I wanted it to go.
That's awesome.
Which, I mean, obviously so far, like, especially, God, 2020, my Dear Universe letter was just like, I might as well burn that and set it on fire.
I think everybody's ready to just pretend like 2020 didn't happen.
No, seriously. But yeah. Do you make vision boards?
So I have kind of like a version of a vision board actually on my desktop, because I have a massive monitor, and I have like sticky notes and things, like electronic sticky notes. So it's an electronic vision board, but I think I need to get into the process of actually making a physical vision board because I think it would just help keep me motivated. But I wanted to know because I feel like I was getting the vibe like, okay, she's got a vision board. I can totally tell. So we can nerd out over this.
I'm so that type A nerd, like for sure. I'm like, oh yeah, no, you nailed it. I do.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, look, so the whole concept of, the vision board thing is very new to me, truthfully, because I didn't know what it was until probably about a year and a half ago when a few of my other songwriter friends were like, yeah, this is on my vision board. And I'm like, can somebody please explain to the class what that is?
See, and that's bold. Like, I don't actively talk about my vision board. I'm impressed with people who do, and maybe I need to, like, and not be so embarrassed by it.
I don't think there's anything to be embarrassed about. Not at all.
Yeah. No, so that more power to them being like, this is on my vision board. I like it.
Well, I like the concept of writing a letter to the universe, as though the year has passed, because it kind of helps you set the intention to make those goals come to life.
Because then, and then I do a thing where I read it halfway through just to kind of check in on like how things are going. And, and that's actually, speaking of another way to keep yourself going, there's been some years where I like am just like, man, nothing's going my way. And then I read that letter of my intention 6 months ago, and I all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm doing better than I thought I was,
Yeah.
Like I've checked all these things off of my goals for the year, and you didn't even realize it. So it's just another good way to like check in with yourself.
Well, and it's also a good way to reset yourself if the first half of the year isn't going the way that you thought it would.
For sure. I agree. Yeah.
That's smart.
It's so true. Yeah, definitely.
So, okay, so I want to kind of move into talking about some music. You've got some new music coming out, yeah?
I do. Yeah. So when things shut down, I made a point for a couple weeks to write a song a day, just to kind of like, like when you're hustling, you don't always have time to write.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, here's the time. And so, a lot of the songs were pretty terrible, but I had enough in the mix that I then was able to put together, an album. And then, in the process of like the quarantine, I got into the studio and have my sophomore album coming out on August 6th. So I'm super excited about that. And
all right.
Kind of turned that into a waterfall release. So I have been like releasing, I think I'll do 4 singles off of the album, like releasing up into the full album. So it's been kind of fun to have a project again to work on.
That's awesome. So what's the concept of this album?
Yeah. So, first I was like, oh, should I do something pandemic related? And then my publicist was like, Lauren, everybody's doing something pandemic related, which is fair. And so the title track off of it is Love on the Rocks. And so I don't know that there's a theme to the album, but definitely, like, I think relationships and love is definitely a theme. And I kind of tried to pick more of my bluesy songs to put on this album and kind of go a little bit harder to the blues world that I have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still a couple like Americana. There's one funk. Hell, there's one like pop punk song on there. Like, so it's bluesy in the broad sense, but it's definitely a little bit more. There's more blues tracks on there than there have been in the past releases.
Cool.
Yeah.
So talk about the blues world a little bit. I know you play every once in a while with Meg Williams.
Yeah.
So she was actually just on the podcast too. I think actually her episode released today.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the blues world in Nashville and what it's been like to be in that scene.
Yeah. Nashville, like, it's got a great blues. I think every town, for the most part, at least have a little bit of a blues scene. Kansas City had a really, really big blues scene. And I think Nashville's a little bit more like blues roots, which is still like, that's very much my vibe. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've always been pulled out of the blues scene, and so there's one specific reason as to why, and it was when I released my first album, God, back in 2015. Um, I sent it into, at the time, Alligator Records, which is like this, for anybody who doesn't know, it's like a pretty well-known blues label out of Chicago. They had this thing where they were like, send us your album. We will I don't know how long it'll take, but we'll guarantee you, just like a private review of it. So I was like, sure, let's do that. That sounds great. So
Cool.
I sent in my album, and he sends back this letter and just tears the whole thing apart,
Oh.
just rips it apart. And like the I don't remember all the specifics of the terrible things he said about how bad I am, but the main thing that I remember was he was like, you are not a blues artist, stop calling yourself a blues artist, like this is not blues. And basically now, 6 years later, I've come to kind of realize that no, I'm not a traditional blues artist, but this guy is a traditionalist,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very particular type of, like, it's a very particular breed of blues enthusiastic, which they believe that blues needs to be in its purest sense, which I'm not here to say is wrong. I just know that that's not my type of blues.
Right.
So it just was kind of like, it set me off on the path of, like, I think for a while I just was like, I'm not blues. And I just had that in my head because it really tore me apart,
Yeah.
and I feel like as of recently was just like, well, you know what, like, just because I'm not traditional blues doesn't mean I don't pull from blues roots,
Absolutely.
and just because I'm not, traditionalists might not be my people.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's a lot of other blues enthusiastics out there. So that's, I don't know if that really answered your question, but I think that like realization recently was kind of a big part of why I was like, okay, I really do love the blues. I love the blues world. A lot of people are very friendly. It's a big world, but it's small enough where you can like make friends quickly, and you can, I don't know, it's just a fun world, and I feel like I wasted a lot of years trying to not be in that world because some asshole told me I shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
That so okay, going back to just, what makes you happy and
Yeah.
being the truest, authentic version of yourself. Like, I've listened to you sing. I consider you a blues artist. In my opinion, means absolutely nothing in the blues world. But look, okay, take for example, like somebody like Johnny Lang. He's not a traditional blues artist, but he's still a blues artist.
Exactly. Or like Gary Clark Jr. You know what I mean? Like, it's so true. Like, it's so true. And I think that that's the biggest thing is that, like, or on the flip side, Jack White, how many 12-bar blues songs does he put out? But you don't consider him a blues artist.
Correct.
You consider him a rock artist, but half of his songs are 12-bar blues.
Yeah.
And so it's so true. And I think that, like, the definitions are broader than some people try to make them. I completely agree. And I think that it just sometimes takes you a second to kind of like come back to your own. I might not be singing 12-bar blues, but I feel it in my gut, like a blues artist. And I think that that's really what it's about.
Absolutely, friend. Well, so Barry and I, she's a pop artist. We were just talking, I don't know, about a month ago about how music has so many more subgenres now than it ever used to.
Oh yeah.
And what's cool is that it's opened doors for artists that aren't necessarily like traditional country or traditional pop or whatever you want to call it. Like, there's room for everybody. And so maybe that asshole didn't really care for what you were doing, but that doesn't mean that there isn't somebody else out there from a label or a company who isn't going to love Lauren Anderson and everything that she brings to the table.
Right. And I wish that, I had either had the confidence to realize that, or I had somebody like you in my life to tell me that, because it took me years to realize that. And, and I feel like I could have spent all these years diving in deeper into the blues scene, and I just didn't.
Right.
And so I completely agree. I think it's rare to meet somebody who is purely one genre these days.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like meeting a unicorn.
Great. Yes. Yeah. So true.
Well, I will always be here for you, and I will always support you. So if you are ever feeling down, you give me a phone call and be like, "Talk me out of this hole that I'm in right now."
Right back at you, girl. Right back at you. We gotta stick together.
It's true. Well, and okay, so to get on to another topic here, like I feel like there are so many women who have that story of somebody who cut them down and said, you can't do this because you don't fit into this box.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm going to be the first to say, fuck you if you've ever done that to an artist.
Fuck that box, too.
Yes. Like, I'm going to set your goddamn box on fire, and I'm going to have a smile on my face while I do it.
Yes, 100%. Amen.
Because that kind of shit, it just, you know what? We don't have time for that anymore.
No. And I think that, like, shame on us for letting people have that much control over our lives.
Amen, girl.
You know? And unfortunately, it's just a learning process. It's not as easy as said than done. It's like, but it's so true. We need people in our lives to just be like, you know what? Screw them. You do you.
Yeah.
If that person doesn't like you, then that's not your person. Find another person.
Exactly.
There's a million of them out there. Billions.
Yeah. There's billions of people out there. Your tribe is out there.
Yes, 100%. I love that. I'm feeling all inspired. I might go write a song after
Yes, do it.
Oh, man.
Just come up with a title better than Fuck That Box.
Yeah. I can't promise that. Fuck That Box is a pretty amazing title. I'm not going to lie. That might be my third album.
Yes.
People will be like, what kind of, is Lauren into porn? Like, what's going on here?
Oh my God, that's great.
Completely confuse everybody.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's like, wow, this derailed real quick. Oh, it's hilarious. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show and just being real, friend. I love that we got to talk about this nitty-gritty stuff that is real because well, there's so many other artists out there who are probably feeling exactly the same things that we did and they don't know how to get out of it.
Exactly. 100%. And I think that like the first step is just talking about it.
Yep.
That's really the first. I mean, this is, again, I feel like so many things come back to, even though I'm not a music therapist anymore, I feel like the therapist in me is as strong as it was the first day. But you just need to talk about it and, and kind of find that everybody else is feeling the same way. And that's how we get through it. It's kind of sticking together.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how we lift each other up too, because
for sure,
when you start talking about it and you find people you connect with, in those moments, when that next 20 seconds comes by and you feel like the world is ending, you call up your friend and go, yo, talk me down.
Yeah. Yes. Talk me off the ledge.
Yes.
So true. So true.
All right, friend. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hopefully I'll catch another Music on the Move show here soon. I need to come out and catch all you ladies.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, girly. Thank you so much, Lauren, for dropping some major truth bombs. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you want to learn more about Lauren, you can find her at laurenandersonmusic.com. Links will be in the show notes for sure. Make sure that you check out her new single, Love on the Rocks. It is coming at you soon, so stay tuned for that. You can find more about us at musiconthemovestudios.com/Paradox Jukebox. You can find more about me, CaitieThompsonmusic.com. I hope that you all enjoyed the episode. I am going to get out of here. Until next time, friends, stay cool and stay positive.